The restaurant went completely silent the moment I looked up from the table and realized the woman standing in front of me wasn't the stranger I had expected. My heart nearly stopped. Every terrible possibility crashed through my mind at once. My friend had promised he was setting me up with his younger sister, someone kind, funny, and completely outside my usual world. Instead, the person pulling out the chair across from me was the one woman who decided whether I kept my job or lost everything I had spent years building. My boss looked just as shocked as I was, and in that frozen moment, neither of us knew whether to laugh, leave, or pretend fate hadn't just played the cruelest joke imaginable. Before we begin, if you believe that kindness is stronger than judgment and that everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that remind us of the good still left in this world. There are moments in life that quietly change everything, and then there are moments that arrive without warning, tearing apart every plan you thought you had. I had spent most of my adult life trying to keep my personal life separate from work. My career meant everything to me because it represented years of sacrifice, sleepless nights, missed birthdays, and countless disappointments that slowly transformed into opportunities. My parents had worked hard their entire lives so I could receive an education they never had. Every promotion felt like repayment for their sacrifices. Every achievement belonged as much to them as it did to me. That was why the idea of sitting across from my boss on what was supposed to be a blind date felt like a nightmare carefully designed to destroy everything I had worked for. Only 2 days earlier, my closest friend Daniel had insisted that I stop hiding behind work. He constantly reminded me that life was about more than deadlines and meetings. He laughed at how I always claimed I was too busy for relationships, saying the real problem was that I had forgotten how to let people into my life. After weeks of refusing, I finally agreed when he mentioned that his sister had recently moved back to town after several years abroad. According to him, she was intelligent, compassionate, and just as uncomfortable with dating as I was. It sounded harmless enough. I trusted Daniel completely. Never once did I imagine he had left out the single detail that would turn my evening upside down. As I stared at the woman sitting across from me, I immediately recognized the calm confidence she carried every day in the office. Victoria was respected by everyone in the company. She had become chief executive after rebuilding the struggling business from the edge of collapse. Employees admired her leadership even if they feared disappointing her. She rarely smiled during meetings, but everyone knew she was fair. Underneath her professional image was someone impossible to read, and that mystery only made the situation more uncomfortable. The silence between us lasted only a few seconds, but it felt endless. Eventually we both accepted that walking away would only make things stranger. We sat down, ordered dinner, and tried to understand how Daniel could have made such an unbelievable mistake. It turned out he wasn't lying at all. Victoria really was his older sister. They simply had different last names because she had chosen to use their mother's surname after their parents divorced years earlier. Daniel had never mentioned her career, and I had never asked about his family beyond casual conversations. Somehow, two completely separate parts of my life had existed side by side without ever colliding until that evening. The awkwardness slowly gave way to curiosity. Away from conference rooms and financial reports, Victoria seemed completely different. She laughed easily. She spoke warmly about her childhood, about caring for her younger brother after their father disappeared, and about working 3 jobs while attending university. She admitted that becoming successful had never been about money. She simply wanted to make sure her family never experienced the fear of wondering whether they could afford food or rent again. Listening to her, I realized I had spent years creating an image of my boss that ignored the human being behind the title. As the evening continued, I found myself sharing stories I rarely told anyone. I spoke about my father's failing health, my mother's determination to remain optimistic despite growing medical bills, and my constant fear that one mistake at work could erase the stability my family depended on. I had always hidden those worries beneath professionalism because I believed vulnerability looked like weakness. For the first time in years, someone listened without interrupting or offering easy solutions. She simply understood. The next morning at work felt surreal. The office looked exactly the same, yet everything had changed. We greeted each other with polite professionalism as though the previous evening had never happened. Neither of us wanted rumors spreading through the company. The workplace remained the workplace, and we both respected that boundary. Still, there was an unspoken understanding between us. The intimidating executive I had feared now carried the face of someone who had listened to my deepest worries over dinner. Weeks passed before we met outside the office again. There was no pressure, no dramatic confession, and no expectation that our unexpected encounter had to become something more. Instead, friendship quietly developed. We discovered shared interests in old bookstores, quiet coffee shops, and volunteering at local community centers. I learned that every Saturday morning she anonymously delivered groceries to elderly people who had no family nearby. No reporters knew. No social media posts celebrated her generosity. She believed that real kindness needed no audience. Watching her help complete strangers changed something inside me. I had become so consumed by climbing the professional ladder that I had forgotten why success mattered in the first place. Success was never supposed to end with promotions or impressive titles. It was supposed to create opportunities to lift others. Inspired by her example, I began volunteering alongside her. Every weekend introduced us to people carrying invisible burdens far heavier than our own. A widowed father struggling to raise 3 children alone. An elderly woman who had not received a visitor in months. A young student working nights just to remain in school. Their stories reminded us that everyone fights battles hidden beneath ordinary smiles. Our growing connection did not go unnoticed forever. Office gossip eventually began swirling after someone spotted us leaving a charity event together. Whispered conversations spread through hallways. Some employees assumed I was receiving special treatment. Others believed my recent promotion had nothing to do with performance. Those rumors hurt more than I expected because they questioned everything I had earned through years of hard work. Rather than ignoring the situation, Victoria made one of the hardest decisions of her career. She requested an independent review of every promotion, evaluation, and project I had completed since joining the company. She insisted that outside auditors examine every detail so no one could accuse either of us of acting unfairly. For weeks I lived under enormous pressure, terrified that even the smallest mistake would confirm everyone's suspicions. When the review ended, the result surprised no one who had truly worked beside me. Every achievement had been earned honestly. My supervisors praised my dedication long before Victoria became chief executive. The independent committee concluded there had been no favoritism whatsoever. Although the rumors gradually faded, the experience taught us how quickly appearances could overshadow truth. Just when life seemed to regain its balance, another challenge arrived. My father's condition suddenly worsened. Hospital visits became daily routines. Medical expenses increased beyond anything our family could manage. I considered selling my apartment and leaving my position to care for him full-time. The future I had spent years building suddenly felt fragile again. During those difficult months, Victoria never tried to solve my problems with money or influence. Instead, she offered something far more valuable. She stayed beside me. She brought meals when I forgot to eat. She sat quietly in hospital waiting rooms without asking for attention. She reminded my exhausted mother to rest while she watched over my father. She never made grand speeches about hope. Her kindness appeared through ordinary actions repeated consistently until they became extraordinary. One rainy evening, while sitting outside the intensive care unit, I finally understood why fate had placed her at that restaurant months earlier. Life had introduced me to someone capable of seeing people beyond their circumstances. She never cared about titles, salaries, or appearances. Whether speaking to executives or janitors, patients or volunteers, she offered the same respect to everyone. That quality could never be measured on a resume, yet it made her richer than anyone I had ever met. My father eventually recovered enough to return home. Though his health remained fragile, he often smiled whenever Victoria visited. He once told my mother that wealth could disappear overnight, beauty would eventually fade, but genuine compassion only became more valuable with time. Those words stayed with me long after he said them. Months later, I asked Daniel whether he had truly forgotten to mention his sister was my boss or whether he had secretly planned the surprise all along. He only smiled and admitted that sometimes people spend so much time building walls around themselves that life needs a little chaos to help them discover what really matters. Whether it was an accident or not no longer mattered. What mattered was the life-changing journey that followed. The experience transformed more than my personal life. At work, I became a better leader by remembering that every employee carried unseen struggles. Instead of measuring people only by numbers, I learned to recognize effort, honesty, and resilience. Small acts of understanding created stronger teams than fear ever could. The company culture slowly changed as managers focused more on supporting employees instead of simply demanding results. Productivity increased, but more importantly, people genuinely cared about one another. Years later, whenever someone asked how Victoria and I first met, we never began with our careers or the awkward dinner reservation. We started with the lesson hidden inside that unbelievable evening. Sometimes life introduces the right person through the wrong circumstances. Sometimes embarrassment becomes the doorway to healing. Sometimes the greatest blessings arrive disguised as disasters. If this story has touched your heart so far, please like this video, share it with someone who believes good people still exist, subscribe to the channel, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that inspire hope, compassion, and second chances. Special request: before this story ends, please leave a comment with the words, "Kindness always finds its way." We'd love to know how many people still believe compassion can change lives. Looking back, I no longer remembered that evening as the most embarrassing night of my life. I remembered it as the moment destiny quietly rewrote my future. I had gone to a restaurant expecting to meet a stranger. Instead, I met someone who challenged my fears, strengthened my character, stood beside my family during our darkest days, and reminded me that success means very little if it isn't accompanied by kindness. The blind date that should have ended in disaster became the beginning of a life built on trust, compassion, humility, and love. It proved that the people we fear misunderstanding the most sometimes become the ones who understand us better than anyone else. And perhaps the greatest miracle of all is that when we choose kindness over judgment, courage over fear, and hope over doubt, ordinary moments become unforgettable stories that stay in our hearts forever.